to take questions if there are any.
So could you just go back to the bit where you're doing the collaboration in the pub with a couple of pints of beer?
Yeah.
Could you just go into that in a bit more detail about like how you, like is it, are the ideas going backwards and forwards between you, or are you both in control of the plotting? Do you do the plotting together, or are you leading the plotting? And
yes, it sort of varies. Some people work different ways. For myself, when I'm doing it with the artist, I like the artist to be very involved in the plotting as well as the just drawing the thumbnails. So I'm not sort of sat at the pub saying, right, this page, this happens, this happens, this happens. If you're going to do it, you might as well do a script. For me, comics are a very collaborative medium, and I like pulling the artist into that medium and getting him to contribute to the plot. So although, as the writer, it's my job to at least have an idea of the basic structure of the story, that's what I'm supposed to do. When you get to breaking it down to particular pages, let's say I'm doing a 120-page graphic novel, for the sake of argument, and it's going to be released as 6 issues separately. With the artist, we'll sit down and we'll say, right, we've got 20 pages now, we want more or less this to happen. But what ideas have you got? What would you like to bring into it? Do you think this would work better this way? Is there a good scene? And the artist will. Vince certainly does the artist that work with the most, but most artists will say, well, actually, I've got a really good idea for that. How about we do this? And then suddenly they'll come up with something you've never thought of. And if it's a bad idea, you can reject it, but if it's not, and often it isn't, that collaboration makes something better. Most collaborative mediums work that way. It's the same if you're doing a movie, you'll start with a script, but the director will then take that and take it in his own direction. I think the comics should be able to work in the same way. The more that I can encourage an artist to put his own stamp and his own ideas into a comic, I think the more fun it is for everybody. I tend to find that my favourite point in making comics is the day that the artist gives me all the artwork for the comic, because it's always a huge surprise when it's done in that style. I have a vague idea of what's going to come back, but there'll be so many other things that he's thought to put in, so many other ideas he's put in. He'll have particularly worked on the pacing, on the timing to make things work. And also, other conversations, other pieces of dialogue will suggest themselves to you. Once you've got the artwork will give you that. So I prefer that way around. I prefer doing it that way around. So, I mean, I would advise anybody to do it that way if they're working with an artist. However, as I say, professionally speaking, generally, you wouldn't be able to do that. Doesn't mean you can't plot with an artist before you actually do a full script. You can still get together at a pub or at somebody's house with the artist and say, how are we going to do this? How are we going to break it down? Should we work on it together? Should we decide what's going to happen? And then go away and do a full script. So you can still bring the artist into the process. But increasingly these days, it's not really done that way. It's much more of the editor and the writer will discuss the story together themselves away from the artist. The writer will then come up with a full script with all the pacing, all the storytelling, all the transitions, and then a artist, whoever it is, will then go away and draw it, and it theoretically should be very close to the script. So that's not my preference. I think it's better to collaborate. And certainly at an early stage, if you've never drawn comics or if you've never written comics, you know how they go. I think collaboration is a fun thing. I think collaboration is a good way to get a good understanding of the way stories work and the way that you can sort of play around with storytelling ideas.
How did you start? Did you bring your story to publisher? Did you just engage an artist, create something, and then try to sell it? How did you?
There are many different ways. So many different ways, really. It is very hard these days in comics to just send a comic, whether it's finished or not, or pages, to an editor at a professional comic company and get them to read it. All big publishers, whether they're comic publishers, book publishers, have what's known as a slush pile. Whatever you send will end up on the slush pile. It's just a big pile of stuff that gets sent. At some point somebody might get around to having a look at it, or they might not. It might stay there for months. It might be really good, but we'll never get a chance to look at it, because editors want to put out the stuff that they're working on. So getting time to spend to go to the slush pile where a lot of it might be awful, it's like something they don't do very often. So it's difficult to just send stuff off. The way that Vince and I did it initially, I mean, I've been involved peripherally in comics for about 20 years, doing little bits and pieces and getting to know people. And I found that networking was the way to go. The more people you meet, the more opportunities you get. So networking in any publishing environment is a good thing. If you know somebody who knows somebody else who knows somebody else, the chances of getting something are a lot easier. The other approach that I use, particularly with Harkin, the first thing that got published by Type, was we self-published it. Now, it's really easy these days to self-publish, particularly on the web. There are a lot of web comics appearing now, a lot of web comics, a lot of them are very, very good. And it's so easy to do a web comic. You draw it, or you can do it on a computer, or however you want to produce the comic, and you can upload it to the web, and instantly it's up there with all the other web comics. So there are a number of big web comic sites. The one that I use for web comic I work on is called Comics Fury, and that has a lot of readers coming to it. And if you keep putting page after page after page up, people will start to read it, people will start to get involved in it. So that's a good training way to get pages under your belt, to sort of get accustomed to producing comics. And who knows, if something you do might be noticed, something might be spotted, and somebody might really like it. So I think web comics are going to get bigger over the next 2-3 years as people self-publish on the internet more. Back when Vince and I originally did it, self-publishing involved drawing all the pages, putting them together, finding a printer, spending a fortune getting 1,000 copies of a comic printed up, going to conventions, standing behind the stall and hoping people would buy them. Now for us it worked. For us we managed to sell quite a few comics and we managed to get a publisher interested, but it doesn't happen very often. It's a slow way of doing it. So I would say at the moment the best way to get work seen, to be noticed, is produce comics, do it as a web comic, get them up online, and then do a bit of networking, or try and get an editor interested. Go to a convention and show an editor some work. That's generally the way in comics, and it seems to work. But there are lots of different ways of getting in. There's no one good way.
Totally different type of question. Do you have any experience using the comic medium for education or for imparting some kind of information?
I don't personally. I talked earlier about a book called Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud, which is specifically that, I suppose. He's written three graphic novels now. Understanding Comics, I think one was called Reinventing Comics, there's another one, I can't remember what it was called. But all of them are educational comics about making comics. There's not a lot of specific educational stuff in comic form. It's an area that has been largely untouched. Largely because I suppose over here it's very much frowned on stuff. So there isn't much out there. There are some. I think Understanding Comics is certainly a really good example of that. And will teach anybody everything they need to know about storytelling, about creating comics, about.
The third one is about perspective, the drawing of comics, I think. So the 3 series, the Understanding Comic.
Is it? Oh right, yes,
Yeah, the one
yes,
drawing.
yes. I mean, all three are very good. One of them specifically about web comics, but it's a little out of date now. Because they've moved on a little since then. But also, and he talks about he gives the rules, but then talks about breaking them. Shows different ways in which you can change the way you use the medium.
So that's the there, is that Understanding Comics, is that about how to do comics?
Yes.
Right, I think, would you asking more about how comics are used in education?
In education, I'd say probably quite
Educational
rarely.
comics.
I don't know, to be honest, that I'm not aware of anything that's specifically used in education, unless it's sort of very young preschool children or something. I don't really know.
Well, I work with theatre, and I know that there's a lot of Shakespeare comics.
Yes,
used
there
as,
are. There are.
Educational tools, and they're great.
Yes.
For instance, there are different versions with the different language difficulties. So you
Yes.
can get like basic lines, you can get normal language, you can get original Shakespeare, and then there are pages with the further information. They're really great. I don't remember right now.
I think there should be more. I think there should be more things like that. There was a graphic novel about 20 years ago called Brought to Light, which was about the CIA, which was very much meant to be a political educational comic, but it was sort of for grown-ups and weird. And there have been comics specifically about issues that have come out. Yeah, Shakespeare was a good example, but there's not a lot out there. I think it's an untapped market, an untapped idea. Anything else, Tom? Oh,
I've got a question about the writing, the actual text. So I've had a little go myself, but what I found really frustrating is that I always seem to be writing too much text.
right.
And I always end up with lots and lots and lots of text and not enough space for it.
Yes.
And every time I read a comic, it's always very nicely sort of like small, direct to the point. Is there any techniques?
I personally don't like a lot of text within panels. I find if you've got one panel where there's way too much talking, where there's way too much conversation, too much dialogue, break it down and do some more panels. Change around the camera angles a little bit, just so the conversation lasts longer. If you've got somebody just stood like this, and then there's like 6 word balloons above them saying stuff, then he stood like that for far too long. You should do a panel where it's like that, then it's like that, then it's like that, then it's like that. You know, and sort of bring the dialogue alive with my suggestion. As for sort of getting lettering looking good, I mean, there's computer software and fonts and things, but I would generally suggest when writing comics, keep dialogue fairly minimal. You know, you don't want more than 2 or 3 word balloons in a panel. I mean, you can, I often do, but you shouldn't really. It's one of those things where again, think about the timing, think about the speed somebody reads through the comic, think about whether you want them to stop at that single panel for that long. Will it slow down the action? Will it bring you out of the comic? Do you want them to actually keep moving through the comic? Do you want those transitions to keep flowing, or do you want them to stop at this picture of this guy like this for a long time? So, if you don't want that, if you do want that, then yes, crowd around the word balloons. If, however, you want the action to keep moving and to make it seem like the dialogue's flowing, then have the conversation while they're walking. You know, and then you can have the conversation taking place through a number of backgrounds, a number of locations. Yeah, keep things moving, keep it flowing.
Is there a particular device for like the bottom of the page before you like turn the page? In terms of when you're breaking up the plot?
There's no set rules. I tend to always put the end of the scene at the bottom of the page on myself. And if you're thinking about a comic where you've got 2 pages, page 2, page 3 there, I will have on page 3 the right-hand page of those 2. I'll enter the scene there, so that when you turn over, you start a new scene. I like that thing about when you turn a page, you're in a new scene. It's very rare in comics these days where you'll see a scene go from one scene, say in the Batcave, to another scene in the Joker's headquarters, take place on the same page. You'll see the scene in the Batcave take place right to the end of the page, and then when you turn over, then you'll be in the Joker's headquarters. So generally, I think that's a good way to do it. I think a good way to break it down is to hold your scene change until you turn the page. It's not a hard and fast rule. It's one of those rules you can break, but it's often done that way.
And also you said biro, so does that mean you do everything like...
Oh, no.
That's just on your draft?
It's largely just the way that we work. When my artist, particularly Vince, who I've done a lot, when he's finished the art, he prints it out for me onto some cheap computer, onto some cheap printed paper. I find personally the best way to write a script over artwork is just to get a biro, draw a word balloon, scribble some words in, and then if they're wrong, I'll just scribble them out, and I do it in biro, it's quicker that way. Once I feel that it's all feels about right, then I'll start to type it in. Then I'll start to sort of build the script up, and for me, the script will only be the dialogue. I mean, we're still sending it back to the comic company for a professional letterer to do the lettering, to do the word balloons, for somebody to colour it. But all they'll get from me script-wise is just dialogue. Barry says this, Jim says this, in a very Barry, blah blah, Jim, blah blah, like that. That's what I'll give as a script. And yes, I'll obviously type it up because it's easier, but I tend to find it's quicker to just go, no, that's wrong, no, that's wrong, and scribble it on first of all. Other people might find it easier to do it all, you know, when they're typing it. Do the amendments there. It'll vary. Whatever feels good, whatever feels comfortable.
Is there a particular software that you use?
No. I just do it in Word or whatever word processing thing on my iPad. I write a lot on my iPad. I think it's called Pages on there. Just anything really. There are if you're doing a full script for a comic, there are certain formats that you should follow, and the best way to learn those is to download a few scripts from the interweb. There's quite a lot of scripts around, which will show you how a script works, how the various panel descriptions are written within there. There's a writer called Alan Moore, a very famous writer. He wrote the original versions of V for Vendetta and Watchmen and various other things. He's infamous for a 20-page comic for writing a 100-page script. Every panel will have massive panel descriptions underneath it in infinite detail. But you don't have to be quite that mad with it. Just sort of, let's say it's a conversation in a bar. You can just put bar, the sun is shining, they're sat at a table, one of them is drinking sherry or whatever it is, and then you can do the dialogue. So how much description you need to compare. You don't need to use any particular software, but if you're writing a full script, certainly you should, if you're trying to put it towards a professional company, you should try and follow a particular script format. So have a look at other scripts.
What time scales do you work on? How long does it take you, for instance?
How long's a piece of string? If you're working in professional comics, you've got to bash them out. If you're writing, you need to be spending no more than 2 or 3 weeks writing a 20-page script, 23-page script. If you're an artist, you need to be able to draw a comic a month. If you can't do that, you won't make a living from it. So you need to be quick. If on the other hand, you're doing a personal project, you're doing something that is just to be self-published, or something that you want to spend a lot of time on, make it take longer. I've been working on this bridesmaid idea with this American artist for over a year now. We've only drawn 6 pages so far, but we've been talking through it a lot and throwing ideas around. When I'm working with a professional artist like Vince, we'll bash out 20 pages a month. So it does vary. It depends who you're working for and what they want from you. But essentially, as with any writing, as with any creative work in which you want to be professional, the best way to make money is to do it quickly. Do it well, but do it quickly. So speed is good. Writers are all lazy. I'm lazy. Artists are even lazier. And sometimes it's a nightmare trying to get them to do stuff. But writers, as a breed, we're lazy and insolent. We do anything to avoid actually having to do the work. So, and because we work at home, it's easy to do that. It's easy to say, oh no, I'll just play video games all afternoon, I can't be bothered. But you have to be really disciplined and you have to put the work in. And successful writers, the ones who do really well at it, are the ones who will be disciplined and who will churn the pages out and get them done. So, yeah, it depends on the project largely. There's no hard and fast answer to that one. I mean, you might want to take 10 years doing a comic, and it might turn out to be the most brilliant thing ever written, and it may have taken 10 years, but it could sell millions. So, you know, and if you'd have done it in a month, it might not have sold a thing. So, it depends on the project, it depends what you're doing. I think a good idea is worth spending time on if you don't have a specific deadline from a particular publisher to work towards. So, it varies. If you're doing Batman, you're going to have to slog out 2 or 3 issues of it a month. Because you're doing Batman and Hulk and something to make the money, so it depends really. Anybody else?
Any more questions?
I was just going to say, you know, you said the description of a panel, and you were comparing it to film scripts quite a lot. So if you had a fantasy film script, where there is a lot of description because you're creating another world, so it's quite hard for film. Is it the same? Like description of film script, is that quite transferable onto panel description, as in more so than a novel?
It is to an extent. I mean, film scripts won't break down the actions quite so specifically. You'll have, in a film script, you'll have the setting, you'll have the environment all sort of listed, and then you'll have a whole bunch of dialogue, loads and loads of dialogue. Whereas with a comic, you're going to have to be putting that description with each panel. So the one panel is going to have to say, right, he picks up the cup. Next panel, he's drinking coffee. Next panel, he's brushing his fingers through his hair. And all those separate movements, if you want those to be definitely done by the artist, will have to be added to the script as you're doing the script. Whereas if you're doing a movie, you can just say, oh, they're drinking coffee together, and the rest will happen by themselves. So you have to break down the moments if you're writing a full script. So it's a little bit tougher, but it's one of those things that you learn and which starts to come quite naturally. But again, sometimes it's a good idea to sort of talk through it first with the artist you're working with, and come up with some ideas together. Keep it as a collaboration. Again, it varies on the project really. So it's slightly transferable. There's certainly a lot of visual language that's definitely transferable from movies straight to comics, and from comics to movies, which is why there are so many movies at the moment drawn from comics. I mean, the Sin City series at the moment, not only is it drawn from comics, the director is the guy who made the comics, Frank Miller, and the comics themselves are being used as thumbnails, as storyboards for the movie. So it's all transferable. It both sort of works in both directions. So there's skills in filmmaking that will be adaptable for comics and vice versa. It's slightly different skills. And with comics, it's all about the gutter. It's all about the panel transitions. It's all about that magic that happens between the panels, and the fact that the images don't move. So you've got to try and make those images move. Try and make that scene live with the static images. And I think there's ways in which you can do that, which give you ideas and techniques that you can never use in film. The way you can slow time down, the way you can draw up to specific moments. There are so many things you can do in comics that you can't quite achieve in movies and films.
And if you had to, for example, sci-fi, millions and millions of budget, employing the artist, how much does it cost to get an artist to say, here's my script, draw it up?
It doesn't matter what the artist is drawing; he'll be paid the same. So an artist will grumble if let's say he's got one page which is all just people talking, and the next page is a giant space battle where there's loads of flying saucers. He'll get paid the same for each page, but page rates vary, and it depends who you're working for. For smaller companies, or for personal projects, or for self-published projects, or for projects where a publisher likes what you've done and wants to put it out, the more common way these days is to give you initially a royalty. You won't get the page rate, you'll get an initial advance royalty, and then you'll get more royalties on sales. That's becoming a lot more common these days. Page rates, you tend to only get with the bigger comic companies, again with the Marvels, the DCs, people like that, who will give you a set page rate for producing the work. And that varies depending on your own experience, depending on what the sales are like, depending on, I don't know, any number of things. But certainly for smaller projects and for smaller publishers, you probably shouldn't expect to get a page rate. You should probably expect to need to negotiate some sort of royalty, some sort of advance. That's much more common now. And it's less risk for the publishers because they're not forking out potentially thousands of pounds for a book that might only sell half a dozen copies.
What do you think about enhanced reality applied to comics? There are several applications for mobile devices which can, animate drawings. What do you think? Is another kind of comics? It can be.
Yes, I think comics are adapting and changing to the technology that's happening now. Particularly iPhones, iPads, mobile apps. They're getting a lot more in usage. Digital comics, my understanding is that these days digital comics are selling more than paper comics these days. The comic industry as a paper product is allegedly starting to die because more people just want to buy them on the interweb and read them straight away, and they don't want piles of them to keep. I think that's potentially a good thing. The industry is still there, it's still working, but it's adapting to new technologies. It's bringing in animation sometimes. There are more motion comics, more flash animated comics that are starting to appear. I think that's a good thing too. I think that the more that the comic medium can adapt to new and interesting technologies, the better. There was a comic put out, I can't remember who drew it, from a couple of years ago, that was entirely vertical, and it was the same shape as the phone. So to read it, you just scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll. Sometimes you scroll left and then down, and right and down. It sort of made it interesting because you weren't quite sure where it was going to go. I like adapting to those new technologies. Some digital comics these days also show the creation of the comic, so you can read the comic, then you can see the penciled version of it by clicking one of the apps, so you can do whatever. I think comics are going to change and grow with technology, and I think paper comics will start to disappear. Graphic novels, I think, are around for a while, but even those, any paper publishing is slowly probably on its way out, in the same way that records and CDs are on the way out. I think things are becoming more digital. So I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I don't think it's going to stop people getting work done and work published. It's just going to be in a different sort of way, which is why I think web comics are quite important. I think web comics are going to get a lot bigger as people think of new and interesting and fun ways to use the web and to use Flash and to use all sorts of different techniques to bring a little bit of verve and excitement into comics. There we go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.